Today we are going to continue down our Cybersecurity 101 pathway by going through Active Directory basics. This is episode 10 of our CySec 101 series, which is a part of the Cybersecurity 101 pathway of TryHackMe. And this is the last room for the module for Windows fundamentals. And as you can see over here, we're going to go through the introduction to Active Directory, Windows domains, Active Directory itself, what domains and actually Active Directory, how they connect to each other, managing users in AD, managing computers or considered objects in AD, groups and group policies, authentication methods, trees, forests, and trusts. And of course, we're going to conclude and wrap it up. And it'll be a good introduction and a good refresher for those of you who are already familiar with Active Directory so that you know how it works and just get reminded of some of its core fundamental foundational policies and concepts. So if you don't already know, Active Directory is the backbone of the world in enterprise and essentially any type of environment where there's a lot of users that need to be managed. Usually they don't use Linux or any other operating system for management of a lot of computers or a lot of employees, mainly because of the fact that it's just so much easier and so much more convenient to do it with Active Directory. So Active Directory really is the backbone of the corporate world, if you just didn't know, because more than 80% of computers inside of the enterprise environment are run on Microsoft. Therefore, Active Directory is how they manage their objects and their domains and the employees and everybody that is inside of their overall environment. So it simplifies the management of devices and users. And what we're going to do is we're just going to go through the essential components of AD. The overall objectives here is to show you what Active Directory actually is, what the domains are, what components go into an AD domain, and of course what forests and domain trusts are, and how to manage users and everything else that we discussed a couple of seconds ago. So the prerequisites are general familiarity. My God, familiarity. That is a horrible word for me to pronounce right now. And so we went through all of the Windows fundamentals that were available prior to this particular episode. So I believe it was 7, 8, 9. So all of the last three episodes inside of this CySec 101 series goes through all of the Windows fundamentals, and now we're officially going into the AD fundamentals. So that's essentially what we're going to be talking about inside of this room. So let's actually talk about what Windows domains are. So here's the visual, here's the example. So imagine that you are a small business and you have 5 computers and 5 employees. In a network like that, you probably can configure each one of those things separately, manually, individually. You'll log into each computer, create the users for whoever it is going to use them, make specific configurations if you need to, and if the computer stops working, you probably can just go into that specific computer and fix it and do whatever you need to do on site in that particular environment. Now, it's pretty easy, right? It's very relaxed, as this word is very descriptive of that little environment in terms of IT itself is concerned. So let's say you expand and now you have 157 computers and you have 320 different users that are located across 4 different offices. So now it's a much more complex situation to manage. Instead of having the one location, you actually have 4 offices, and then you have 320 different users that will be individually using 157 different computers. So now you really can't manage each one of those things as a separate entity. It's very, very difficult to do that, very time consuming, energy consuming to do that. So to be able to manually configure those things is probably going to be a nightmare. To overcome this, we can actually use something called the Windows domain. And a domain is essentially a group of users and computers under the administration of a given business. So the idea is to centralize the administration of common components of a Windows computer in a single repository called Active Directory. And the server that runs the Active Directory service is also known as the domain controller. So you have the domain, which is essentially this right here. So we have domain, which would be tryhackme.com. Inside of this domain, we have our database server, we have the domain controller, we have file servers, and then we also have the workstations as well as desktops. And these all fall under the TryHackMe.com domain. I did a video on using PowerShell to enumerate domains and to enumerate users and objects and forests and everything like that using the command line and using PowerShell. And it's a much faster way to, if you know the command line, it's a much easier and faster way to actually enumerate everything that's going on inside of Active Directory and even make certain modifications and changes if you need to. But there is the GUI, or the GUI, however you pronounce it. One of our users or one of our community members was like, is it GUI or is it GUI? Or I don't know what the pronunciation is. I guess it depends on the accent that you run. I always thought of it as GUI. But so there's a graphical user interface, and that's why Active Directory is actually so convenient, because you can essentially click around and drag and drop and do a lot of these things in a user-friendly type of an environment. But the domain controller is the main server that runs the Active Directory services. So this would be the domain controller, and with the domain controller, you can connect your database server and your file server and your workstations and your desktops, as well as your users and everything else. And the domain controller would be connected to the main domain, which in this particular case would be TryHackMe.com. So the main advantages of having a configured domain is the centralized identity management, meaning all of your users across the network can be configured from AD with a few clicks, and then managing security policies, so configuring the policies like password requirements or frequency of resetting of the passwords, or what happens if somebody logs in or has a failed login 2 or 3 times. And then there's a lot of different security policies and what they get access to, what they shouldn't get access to, so on and so forth. So all of those things are considered security policies, and those can be done by creating one major group policy or security policy and then just assigning that group policy to a series of computers or a series of locations or a series of users. And it makes it very easy to manage and configure those security policies from Active Directory. So the real world example would be, let's say you already, most likely you've actually been working at some kind of a job that you've gone through a Windows computer at some point. So it could even be in the school or university environment where you try to use the computers inside of the computer lab or inside of the library. So most likely, if you're inside of a school or university network, you're often going to be provided with a username and password that you can use on any of the computers. And the credentials are valid for all of the machines, because no matter where you input them, it's going to forward that authentication back to the Active Directory where it's sitting on the main server, on the main domain controller computer, and then your credentials are going to be checked. And the credentials don't need to be on each machine, because all of those machines are also connected to the domain controller and the computer, the main server. And so you can essentially log in on any of those computers in any classroom or any of the computer labs using your student email as well as the password that you've selected for yourself. And you can get access to the resources that are available to you as a student, as well as any file share or any kind of storage that may be assigned to you. It's the component, AD is the component that allows the school and the university to restrict you from accessing the control panel on the school university machines. And policies are usually what are used to deploy throughout the network so that you don't get admin privileges over the most sensitive computers, meaning the control panel or the domain controllers, so on and so forth. So in this particular example, and in everything that we're going to run through this room, is going to be associated with the THM incorporated entity. So we're going to assume the role of the IT admin at THM. Our first task, we've been asked to review the current domain, which is the thm.local domain, which is a very similar or a common syntax that is used to create domains. And essentially it would be .local. So whatever the name is of the company or whatever the acronyms that you choose, typically .local would be the suffix, the end of it, that would imply that you're dealing with the domain itself. And then there's additional configurations that we're going to go through. We're going to have admin credentials over a pre-configured DC, or domain controller, to do these things. I've already launched the machine, so we're going to get into it in a little bit. If you wanted to use remote desktop, if you've connected to this room via OpenVPN and you want to just log in using your own computer, as long as you're connected to the VPN of THM, you can do this with this username and password, but I'm using the browser So it's going to show everything to us inside of our browser. The THM/administrator would be the username if you are using RDP, and then of course you have the administrator user that you're going to get access to on the THM domain. Since we're going to be connecting to this, it's also a good time to actually start the attack box so that we can actually do this. And I'm going to actually use the attack box as well. The question that we have here is, in a Windows domain, credentials are stored in a centralized repository called Active Directory, and that was available through the contents of this particular task. So the next one is, the server in charge of running the Active Directory is called the domain controller. And those are the only two questions that we have that we got from just the contents of this particular task. Now, if you actually don't have a paid membership with TryHackMe, you can get access to this room for free, and you can actually connect to the VPN with THM with TryHackMe for free. You don't need to have a paid subscription to get access to the virtual machine in this room, nor do you need a paid membership to be able to connect via VPN to launch your RDP session. So that is it for our actual virtual machines and the overall coverage of Windows domains. So now we're going to talk a little bit about Active Directory, and we're actually going to use this virtual machine that has been assigned to us, which is going to be our Active Directory Windows machine. The core of the Windows domain is the Active Directory Domain Service, which is also known as ADDS. This service acts as a catalog that holds the information of all of the objects that exist in the network. The objects could be users, they could be groups, they could be machines, printers, any kind of file share, or really anything else that would exist inside of Active Directory. So this is going to be some of the explanations here. So users are the most common object in Active Directory. They're one of the objects known as security principals, meaning that they can be authenticated by the domain and they can be assigned privileges over resources like files or printers. You could say the security principal is an object that can act upon resources in the network. They can be used to represent two types of entities. So users can represent two types of entities. You can have people, which are generally represented persons in the organization, like managers and tellers and so on and so forth. And then you have these services that can also be defined as users, like IIS or the MS SQL, Microsoft SQL. Every single service requires a user to run it, but service users are different from regular users because they're only going to have the privileges needed to run that specific service. So meaning service users only have the privileges to run that specific service, while people users, human users, will have the privileges to run multiple services, right? So you have different types of users, but essentially they fall under the user object inside of Active Directory. Then you have the machines. So this is another type of object inside of AD, and it's literally any computer, any printer, anything that's connected to the Active Directory domain. The machine object is going to be created for every single one of those machines. And they're also considered security principals and are assigned an account just as any other user. This has somewhat limited rights within the domain itself. So the machine accounts themselves are local admins on the assigned computer. They're generally not supported to be accessed by anyone except the computer itself. But as with any other account, if you have the password, you can use it to log in. So the machine is typically referred to as the system when you are logged into the computer itself. If you actually have the password to be the system user, meaning you have the admin privileges on that specific computer, and that's it. So you don't have admin privileges of the domain, you have admin privileges of that machine, of that system. And that's also known as the system user. So the security principle in this context is just that machine itself, just that computer itself. So machine account passwords are automatically rotated out and are generally comprised of 120 random characters. Identifying machine accounts is relatively easy. They follow a specific name scheme. So the machine account and the computer followed by $, for example, DC01 followed by the $. So if the machine itself is named DC01, the account on the machine is called DC01 $. And then it would have system privileges, or aka known as admin privileges on that specific machine. So if the machine is DC01 or the machine is machine 1, then the machine account is going to be DC01 $sign or machine 1 $sign. Then we have security groups, which are again another set of objects that exist inside of the Active Directory domain service. So if you're familiar with Windows, you probably know that you can define user groups to assign access rights to files or other resources instead of a single user. This allows for better manageability, as you can add users to an existing group and they will automatically inherit all of the group's privileges. This is where the convenience of Active Directory really kicks in. So when you create a security group, and let's say they're for all of the tellers, right? In general, let's say the bank has thousands of tellers and then they keep hiring new tellers. So if a new teller comes in, the system administrator, the domain administrator, all they really have to do is once they've created the new user account for that teller, they literally just drag and drop the account that they've created inside of Active Directory. They'll drag it and they'll drop it inside of the teller security group. And by just dragging that user inside of that security group, that user now inherits all of the permissions of that specific group, all of the privileges of that group, but they're also limited to all of the limitations of that group, right? So if that specific teller group only has access to XYZ resources and they don't have access to ABC resources, then that new user, by getting dropped inside of that group, is going to only have access to XYZ and they won't have access to ABC. So it's very, very convenient. Once you've established your foundations and you have all your group permissions and so on and so forth, it becomes very easy to manage the users inside of Active Directory. Security groups are also considered to be security principals. Therefore, they have privileges over resources on the network. Groups have both users and machines that can be members to it. So you could have teller computers as well as manager computers, right? So if all of the computers on the teller line are only supposed to be limited to teller permissions, then you can just drag them essentially inside of that same group permission and security group, and it will only have those types of permissions, and you won't be able to do administrator type activities on a teller computer because it's limited to the privileges of a teller, which is another redundancy when it comes down to security configuration, so that you can make sure that a teller computer won't be able to do administrator activities. Several groups are created by default on a domain that can be used to grant specific privileges to users. As an example, these are some of the most common groups. So we have the domain administrator, which is the highest security group. These guys can do anything inside of the domain. They have admin privileges over the entire domain. So they can administer any computer, including any of the domain controller computers. They can administer any group, any user. They can essentially do anything. These guys have free reign over the entire domain. Then you have the server operator. So they can administer domain controllers, and they can't change the administrative group membership. So they can administer the DCs, the domain controllers, but they can't change any of the administrative group memberships. Then you have the backup operators that are allowed to access any file, ignoring the permission reserved for that file. They're used to perform backups of data on computers. And so if you already probably have figured out, this would be the highest. And as we go down this list, we're going to get lower and lower in privileges. So from backup operators, you have account operators, which can create or modify other accounts in the domain. Then you have the domain users. So these are all the existing user accounts inside of the domain. Then you have the domain computers, and you have the domain controllers themselves. So actually the domain controller will probably end up being right up here with the domain admin, because domain controllers are higher in the hierarchy than domain computers are or domain users are. But for the most part, this entire list drops in privilege as we go down the list until this very, very, very last piece right here, which is all the existing domain controllers inside of the domain. And the domain controllers are the servers that the domain administrators are mostly interacting with to create everything else inside of the domain. So we can be able to see the list of default security from Microsoft documentation by going to the actual Microsoft website and looking at the Active Directory security groups and so on and so forth. So this is all inside of the Microsoft Learn environment, and you can can just search for Active Directory security groups on Google, or go to the Microsoft Learn website and search for Active Directory security groups, and you'll get a lot of great information. And essentially everything that we just talked about is available through the Microsoft documentation as well, except it's just limited to text, and you have to kind of learn how to sift and sort through all of this information to be able to get what you need. But anything that you would need is available through the Microsoft Learn website. So let us move on to the users and computers portion of Active Directory. Now, to configure users, groups, or machines in AD, we need to log in to the domain controller and run Active Directory users computers from the start menu. So you could actually search for this, and I'm going to start doing this on the actual machine that we have. Most likely we need to get all of the answers for this task by doing that. So when you do this, it's going to open up the hierarchy of users, computers, and groups that exist in the domain. They're organized in the organizational units, which are container objects that allow you to classify users and machines. They're mainly used to define sets of users, which with similar policy requirements or policing requirements. The people in the sales department, for example, are going to have a different set of policies applied to them than people in IT. Keep in mind that a user can only be a part of a single organizational unit at a time, so just keep that portion in mind. So if you want to give them higher privileges, you would give them access to the organizational unit that has the higher privileges. So looking on the machine, we can see that there's an OU called THM with 4 child OUs for IT management, marketing, and sales department. And it's very typical to see the OUs mimic the business structure, as it allows the efficient deploying baseline policies that apply to entire departments. And while this would be expected for most of the time, you can also define OUs arbitrarily. So if we right click on any of these, we can actually create a new OU under it called students, for example. So this is what it looks like, and I'll show you again, but this is exactly what it looks like when you go inside of the Active Directory users and computers. There is this pane on the left side that shows us THM local, which is our actual domain here. And then you can see that there's Active Directory users, and under Active Directory users, there's THM local, and this is this domain. We can actually create another domain, which would be, let's say, THM Canada, for example, and that would be a completely different set of organizational units and marketing departments and so on and so forth. And then once you have that secondary domain, now you're falling into the category of having a forest. And so I'm kind of getting ahead of myself, but the way that this is designed, it's so easy to create a new domain inside of this environment, and then just right click on the domain and then add a new organizational unit, and then right click on the organizational unit and add another one, and so on and so forth. So it's so freaking easy and so convenient to interact with Active Directory. Like just look at this, the way that it's designed. And then of course, when you click on it on this pane right here, you have these same exact items, and then you can just double click on one of these, and it'll take you inside of IT. I'll show you all of this when we actually go. So if you open it, you can see all the users that are inside of it. So for example, they opened IT, and then we can see the users inside of IT. And you can see that there are other default containers, for example, the built-in, the computers, the domain controllers, users, managed service accounts, all of these things. And then we have security groups versus organizational units. So organizational units are applying policies to users and computers, which include the configurations that pertain to those entities. And a user can only be a member of a single OU at a time. Now, security groups are used to grant permissions over things, and a user can be a part of many security groups. So they can be in the management, or not even management, let's say they can be inside of the marketing organizational unit, but they could be a part of multiple security groups that grants them permissions to different assets or objects inside of the domain. So they would be only inside of one organizational unit, but they can be inside of multiple security groups. So organizational units apply policies to users and computers. Security groups grant permissions over resources and objects inside of the domain. So which group normally administrates all of the computers and resources? That was inside of the document text, or inside of the task text, which is the domain administrator. What would be the name of the machine account associated with a machine named Tom PC? And we know that all we need to do is just add a $sign at the end of it. So it would be Tom-PC $sign. That would be the machine account that's associated with the Tom PC machine. And then we have the company creating a new department for quality assurance. What type of organization or what type of container should we use to apply to all quality assurance users so that the policy can be consistently applied to all of them? And that would be the organizational unit. So it's the group that we're going to assign to all of the quality assurance users so that the policies can be applied to all of them. And remember that organizational units are used to assign policies, right? Security groups assign permissions, organizational units assign policies. So just to give you a quick demonstration of everything that we actually just read through, I have this machine that's open. I just clicked on the search bar or the search button at the bottom right here, and I just type in active, and then immediately I get the option for Active Directory users and computers. And so we're just going to open that up, and it will open up exactly what we just saw on our screenshots over here. So we have Active Directory users and computers. We can see that we have the THM local domain. Inside of the THM local, once I select it, I will see all of the options that are over here, and I can just open up THM and it will show me all of the departments inside of THM. If I click on users, it'll show me all of the users that exist inside of this domain, and then it'll show us what type of person or what type of object they are. So the administrator is actually a user, the cert publishers is a security group, and so on and so forth. So if we click on THM one more time, we can see all of the departments that exist inside of the THM domain or the THM organizational unit that's a part of this domain. And then inside of this, we have the management, which is Daniel is the only manager here. We have Claire, Mary, and Philip, which are our IT. We have marketing, and Mark would be in marketing. And then research and development is Bob. And then sales is Christine, Robert, Sophie, and Thomas. And then if I wanted to create another one, I could just right click on IT and then create a new organizational unit by just going over new, and then right here we can do organizational unit, and just for the hell of it we can create one called students as the name implied, and just click OK. And now we can see that under IT I now have a new organizational unit called students, and then I can drag Claire into students. And so it says moving objects can prevent your existing system from working. For example, moving it can affect the way that it's applied to the organizational unit. Are you sure you want to do this? I'm going to say, yeah, I do want to move Claire to students. Now, if I open up students, I can see that Claire is inside of students. And then I can just drag and drop Claire back inside of IT, and then click yes again. And then now we can go back to IT and we can see Claire is back here. So it's that easy to assign new permissions or organizational units to users. You literally click and you drag the person and you drop them here, or I can drop him in management or marketing or any other department. And that's how simple and easy it is to assign a new organizational unit to somebody. And then I can just right click on students here and I can delete the students organizational unit. And since there's nobody in there, you don't have sufficient privileges to delete students. Isn't that interesting? So it means that I did not open this as an administrator. So if I go back here and actually click on Active Directory and go right click on it and then run it as an administrator, now I can actually go ahead here and right click on students and then delete students, and I should be able to delete it. Oh, I still don't have privileges. That's interesting. So that's a big safeguard that has been applied to what we're doing over here. So that means that I cannot delete that organizational unit because of the safeguards that have been placed. It's interesting that I can create the organizational unit, but I can't delete the organizational unit. That's very, very interesting for me. So anyways, moving on to our next piece right here, which is the managing of the users inside of Active Directory. Our first task as the domain admin is to check the existing ADOUs and users and the recent changes that have happened to the business. So we've been given the organizational chart right here. We have Daniel, which is the GM. We have Mark, which is in marketing, Sophie and Thomas that are in sales, and Philip, Mary, and Claire are in IT. So if you remember, we actually had 3 people that were inside of, or maybe even 4 people that were inside of sales. So first and foremost, right here, literally it says deleting the users and everything is actually going to give us this error that we actually just got over here, that we don't have permission to do this. So by default, OUs are protected against accidental deletion. So to be able to delete it, we need to actually enable advanced features in the menu. So there we go. That's one of the reasons why I wasn't able to delete it. So once we do this, we're going to actually go into the container. So I'm actually going to do this right here because I really am now curious as to how to delete that stupid organizational unit that I just created. So I'm still going to open it with administrator privileges. So when you right click on it, you just run it as an admin, and I'll still open it as an administrator privilege. And I'm just going to click on view up here and then click on advanced features. And now I have advanced features that are open. So once I have advanced features that are open, it says there are going to be additional containers that enable you to disable accidental deletion. So to do this, right click on the OU and go to properties, and then you'll find a checkbox in the object to disable the protection. So I'm going to go to my THM, which was right here, and then click on sales, or where did I think I made it in sales, right? No, it wasn't in sales. Where was it? Where did we create that new OU? I thought we created, there we go, it's inside of IT. So right here, then we're going to click on the students, right click on this, and then go to properties. And then inside of properties, it says under object, I'm going to go here and then protect object from accidental deletion. I'm going to turn that off, and I'm going to apply it, and then go over there. And now I should be able to right click on this mofo and delete it, and it won't give me, there we go. So, okay, so by default, it is protected from deletion, but you can go into advanced settings, the advanced features here, and then right click on the object or any of these organizational units, and then go to the object tab and then protect object from accidental deletion, turn that off so that you can actually delete it. So that is how we were able to delete the item that we had. So once we did this, check the box and try deleting it again, and we'll be able to prompt that we want to do it, which is actually beautiful. And so now we'll notice that some of the departments the users don't match the ones in the organizational chart. Create and delete users as needed to match them. So as one of the nice things that we can do is to give specific users some control over the OUs. This process is known as delegation, and we can do that later. So first and foremost, let's actually match the organizational chart that we have here to what is going on inside of the domain itself. So inside of the management, we have Daniel, which is right here. Mark is going to be in marketing. There's only one person here. Sales is the only department that I know I have to delete some people. So there we go. So we have Sophie and Thomas that are the only people. And then I have IT, which has Claire, Mary, and Philip. So those are all going to be good. The only person that we're removing is sales, and then it seems that research and development has also been deleted. So I actually need to delete Bob in research and development, and I also need to delete research and development in total. And then I need to delete, who do I need to delete? Sophie and Thomas. So I need to delete Christine and Robert from sales. So we're going to right click on Christine. We're going to go to Christine's properties. We're going to go to the object. I wonder if this also applies to Christine. So there is no actual object for Christine, so I should be able to just delete Christine. So let's do that, and we can actually do that. And then we're going to delete also Robert. So that's what we're going to do here. Perfectly done. And now we need to go to research and development. We're going to delete Bob. Actually, I think I can even do this. I can click on Bob and I can click the delete button up here, and that's easy. That's like an easier way to do it. And then finally, I got to right click on research development. I got to go to the properties of research and development, go to the object tab right here, protect from accidental deletion, apply that, okay. And now I can actually delete research and development. And just like that, we now match exactly the organizational chart that we have inside of our example over here. So perfect. Now we can move on to the delegation portion. So I can delegate control over this. And one of the most common uses is to grant IT support to privileges to reset other low privilege users' passwords. So this is actually something that managers, and I refer to the bank because I used to work at a bank for many years. So this is one of the easier ways that I can kind of bring all of these examples to life for myself. So the branch manager had the option to be able to reset the passwords of everybody inside of the branch in case we forgot our passwords or in case we were locked out. So according to the organizational chart, Philip is in charge of IT, so we'll probably want to delegate the control of resetting passwords over the sales, marketing, and management OUs to Philip. So we can delegate the control of the sales OU to Philip. To delegate this, you can right click on the OU and delegate control. So I can click on sales. So let's actually do that. We're going to right click on sales, and then we're going to go to the delegate control button right here. And then what we want to do is we want to go to the wizard that we have here. So we're going to right click next here, or click next, and it says select the users and groups that we want to add permission to. So we're over here. Now this is very important. So once you actually enter the name of the person, you want to click check name so you can make sure that you actually have the right name of the person. So if I actually go over here and I'll just type in Philip, right? So we'll see if we can actually get anything, because there should be only one Philip inside of the entire organization. So there we go. We have Philip at THM local, and this is the guy that we want. So okay, and now he's the one that has the control. So we're going to go to next, and now we want to say what do we want to give him as the permission for him to be able to do, and then you can give him all of this information. So reset user passwords and password change at next logon. That would be the one big thing that we want to give. So let's see what the instructions over here tells us to do, and it says, yeah, reset user passwords and force password change at next logon, and that's pretty much it, right? So we can go ahead and do that. Now it says click next a couple of times. The Philip should be able to reset passwords for any user in the sales department. While you probably want to repeat the steps to delegate the password reset of the marketing and management, we'll leave it here for this task. You're free to continue to configure the rest of the OUs if you want to, which I guess I'll do, whatever. Now let's use Philip's account to try and reset Sophie's password. So these are Philip's credentials for us to log in via RDP, which we can do from the attack box real quick. Now when we connect to this, we need to use that, of course, to be able to log in. And this is what it looks like if you wanted to use Windows PowerShell as Philip to be able to reset the password for Sophie. And it'll tell you what the situation is and how we can do it. And now if you wanted to connect to RDP as Sophie, we'll see that we're going to get a notification to reset our password from the first logon. So first I'm just going to do this, and I'm just going to make sure that I finish this portion right here, since it's going to be over Sophie and the sales department. So we will minimize this, and now I'm going to open up my attack box here, and I'm going to log in as Philip. So that's the piece that we want to confirm that everything that we just did actually works the way that we want it to. So I'm going to open up my my terminal inside of my Ubuntu attack box here. And one of the, I would say probably the most useful, or the most convenient that I have used, and it's very reliable, is Xfree RDP. And so Xfree RDP is just like that, Xfree RDP. And then what I believe that's what it is. So let's actually confirm that real quick before I go ahead and I give you some bad advice. So let me see. Okay, yes, it is actually Xfree RDP. And so Xfree RDP has a couple of arguments and parameters that we got to feed it. So the first one would be the U, which is in this case is going to be THM/Philip, from what I remember, right? THM/Philip. So that's the U. And then there's the P, which is going to be Philip's password, which is in this case Claire 2008. I think he loves Claire. What? Claire 2008 is going to be in password, and then V for, I guess, the I don't know, the visor, or I don't know. And so that is going to be the specific domain that we're going to log into, which is actually this computer right here. This is what we're going to be logging into in this particular case. So let's make sure that this is it, and just paste that bad boy over here, press enter. And it says Xfree RDP not found. So hold on, maybe I don't have it. I thought it was already installed. Maybe I'm using the wrong command here. That was one of the things that I was kind of not sure about. So let me just make sure I'm using the right command. I know that these are the parameters, but I think the tool itself that I'm referencing doesn't exist. So let me just confirm real quick. Yeah, so it is actually the proper tool reference, so I just got to make sure that we install it. So let me see if I actually can install this real quick. Okay, so there we go. That was our installation. So I'm just going to clear the screen, press up once, up another time, and then up another time, and one more. There we go. So let's try to do that. And now we should actually get, there we go. And there it is. So here it is. So the username or password is incorrect. Usually this is what happens, right? So it says to do the // thing, but then it always says that the username, the way that it was set up is incorrect, and then it just gives us what the proper username format is. So that part isn't really that big of a deal, because it will at least bring you to the screen where you can re-enter the password, because it's going to format the username for you. You see, I did it exactly what it says over here, right? So you're my witness right here. I did it exactly how it's supposed to be. So Claire, and then we're going to do 2008, and then just click on that to make sure that we have it right. There it is, and then log in, and now, username and password is incorrect. How is that even right, bro? I literally did it right. This is so annoying. Okay, so let's do this. We'll do // Philip. Let's do that. And let's see if that works. Okay, that's what it was. So we needed to, okay, you saw what I just did. Anyways, that one worked. Okay, perfect. So now we're actually here. So now what we're going to do is we're going to use this series of PowerShell commandlets, is what we call them. So these things right here where it says set yada 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 or get yada yada yada, all of these things are called CMD-lets. I call them commandlets. And so this is the command that we're going to input inside of PowerShell. This specific one is a command window that has been turned into a PowerShell window. That's why we see the black and white. So I will do exactly what they did here, just to make sure that it works right. So first I'm going to type CMD in my search right here, and it will bring up command prompt, and I'm just going to do boom, click on that, it'll open it up right here, and we can see users Philip da 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 da. So the way to turn this into a PowerShell is we just do PowerShell like that, press enter, and then now we see that we have the PS right here that matches exactly what we have over here. You have to be inside of a PowerShell instance to be able to do the set account password commandlet or anything of the sort. I can also just go here and immediately just go PowerShell and just open up Windows PowerShell, and it will open up exactly as PowerShell, as you can see right here. And in this way, I like PowerShell Windows by itself because it is a little bit more color coded. So for example, if I do the set AD account password, so let's type that in real quick. So we have set AD account password. I think it is actually color coded. It kind of looks like a little yellow thing over here. So maybe it is color coded. So let's do it over here. And if we do set AD account password, it's a little bit more noticeable inside of the PowerShell window. But for the most part, I think it's also, it is definitely color coded right there as well. So we'll just keep the original Windows CMD here. And so now I need to just type all of this stuff. So I'm going to type this real quick because let's see if it actually works with the copy paste. So I'll just copy this, and let's see if I can space right here and then do Control V. Okay, it did work. Perfect. Okay, so this is what we did. So we did set AD account password. Sophie is the user. Reset is the option. And we are doing a new password as well. So you're going to reset and you're going to assign a new password. And then it says read host as a secure string, and the prompt is going to be new password. And as a secure string for this portion right here means that once you try to enter it, it won't be clear text onto the screen, and it will be hashed out, or it will be encrypted just in case somebody captures our traffic and they're reading, they're sniffing our traffic essentially, and they're seeing the commands that we're inputting. They should not be able to see what I'm actually inputting, right? It should be encrypted so that it's not clear text, so that they can't find out what Sophie's password is, right? So that's what this portion right here is actually doing. So it says read host as a secure string, and the prompt will be new password. And then verbose means that everything is just going to be displayed onto the screen as it's happening. Verbose output gives you a good output so that you can see what's going on. So right here, now I'm going to go over here, press enter, and let's press enter one more time to make sure that it's actually running. Okay, there we go. So password. And so I'm just going to do password with a capital P, enter, and then loading Active Directory, yada, yada, yada. The password does not meet the length, complexity, or history requirement of the domain. Okay, so I guess I can't use a weak-ass password like that. So we'll run it one more time. New password. I will do strong password 123 exclamation, enter. Cool. Okay, so on target, the operation is fine. So that is fine. So I did strong password, 123 exclamation. That is now the password for Sophie. So now what we can do is we can connect via RDP to Sophie and see what Sophie's situation is going to be like. So we set Sophie's password. I'm going to close this. Now you can see that I have this window right here, but it's still inside of my Ubuntu instance because this window is actually just a window that's been created. Look at that in my background. You see that? That's the actual Linux Ubuntu machine that we use to do our RDP. So I'm just going to close this instance, and now my instance of the RDP has been closed here. So we're going to clear that out, and then we're going to do xfree RDP, and we're going to do the Sophie user, which is, again, it's just going to tell me that it's a wrong username, but whatever. And we will do the strong password 123 exclamation, and the V is going to be the domain IP that we have at the top of the screen right here. And hopefully we will, I mean, it's still going to tell me that I have the wrong user because the format is not what it wants it to be, but we'll be able to make that adjustment real quick once the window pops up. So there we go, boom. And then so I'm just going to do this real quick. There we go. And we're now logged in as Sophie. And there should be a message that's going to pop up that says I need to reset my password, though. That's the piece that is not happening. It should actually ask me, oh, I think it popped up, but something happened. But yeah, so there you go. Oh, you know what? Since we don't want Sophie to keep using the password, then we know we can also force a password reset at the next logon. And I didn't do this part. I missed this part. Okay, gosh. Okay, fine. What was the flag found on Sophie's desktop? This is the flag that's been found on Sophie's desktop. So there we go. Thank you for contacting support. I forgot to run this command. But essentially, when you're still logged in as Philip and you're inside of the PowerShell command, you would run this command after you ran this command to force Sophie to change her password at logon. That's why I didn't get that notification to change my password. So if you literally just type this in letter by letter, press enter, it's just going to say that the operation has been set so that the next time that Sophie logs on, then you would be able to reset the password. So in case that didn't happen for you, and hopefully you didn't like go exactly as I did, and you still have the opportunity to force the reset, but in case you didn't, or in case you want to run it again, you can just log back out or re-log in as Philip. I'm not going to do it in the interest of time, but you can just re-log in as Philip and then go into PowerShell and set a new password, and then go ahead and run this command to force Sophie to change her password at the next logon, and that's what's going to happen. Now, the next question is the process of granting privileges to a user over OU or AD object is called delegation, and that is it, and that's all we got for managing users in Active Directory. So let's go into managing computers in Active Directory. By default, all the machines that join a domain instead or except for the domain controller are going to be put in the container called computers. So if we check the domain controller, we'll see that we have some computers already, and as you can see by the names that have been assigned to them, they belong to the various users, except for these last few right here, which are our servers. And so we have the server DB01, which would probably be a database, and then DB02, which is another database, and then you have the web, which would probably be our web server. Now we can see the servers and the laptops corresponding to the users, and then there's the fact that not all of these things, or it's not the best idea to actually have all of these people or all of these computers in the same location. So you want different policies to be able to manage the server, for example, and the machines that run regular users on a daily basis. You want different policies to govern those various computers. So there's no golden rule on how to do this. The excellent starting point in this case would be according to their use. So you want to have a policy for workstations, and you want to have something for servers, and you want to have something for domain controllers, so on and so forth. So since we want to tidy up this whole thing, we're going to create two separate OUs for workstations and servers, and that will be under the users. And then from here, we can drag and drop computers in there. So Domain controller is already an OU that's created by Windows, and we can see that right here under the domain controller. So we're going to be creating directly everything under THM local, and in the end we should have something that looks just like this. Now we're going to move the personal computers to the workstations to the server OUs from the computer container. Doing so will allow us to configure policies for each of the organizational units later. So since we have this, I'm just going to close my instance that's inside of my attack box here, and I'm going to go back into the Active Directory computer that we have over here, and we're going to reopen our Active Directory users and computers, and then we're now going to create. And so what we need to do is I need to get out of advanced features and just go back into my regular view here, and under users I'm going to create a couple of new organizational units. So we're going to create one that is called the computer. So where's my OU? Let's zoom in a little bit here. Actually, so it won't be directly under users yet. So when you right click on users, it won't allow you to create an organizational unit directly. So what you're going to do is you're going to right click on THM local first, then you're going to do new, and then you're going to do organizational unit. And then what we're going to do is we're going to create this one, which is going to be workstations, and then the other one is going to be servers. So I'll do another one here, and we're going to create another one called servers. And then we're going to be able to drag and drop them under the users portion right here. So we see this, we're going to drag that and put it over there. And it says it's fine. I don't want to show this warning again. So there we go. We can't move it because access is denied. So we're going to go back into advanced features real quick. And then we're going to move this guy under the users, and it's still access denied. So let's see what we need to do in this particular case. Or you know what? My apologies. I thought it was actually under users, but it's not. It's separate from users. So it's actually fine. It looks exactly the way that it's supposed to. And I was trying to do something that we're not even being instructed to do. And I guess it's not even possible to do it because it belongs to THM local. I mean, it's probably possible to do it, but it's beyond the scope of this particular room and this particular task. So I'm not going to go down a rabbit hole and try to do something that isn't part of the instructions, because I always get caught up and I always digress and go into all these different freaking adjacent tasks and what do we call them, side missions or something like that. So we'll be creating them under the THM local domain controller. In the end, we have the structure that looks just like this. And now we're going to move the personal computers and laptops to the workstations, and then the servers to the servers from the computers container. So this is how easy that is. We're going to go inside of the computers container, and we have all of these guys, and I'm just going to do this like this, right? I'm just going to click on Philip, hold down Shift, click on PC Mary, and it's going to take all these guys. So these are the laptops and these are the PCs. We're going to drag them, and it's going to go under workstations, and just like that. Look how easy that was. And we're going to click on this, then we're going to Shift, click on that. Now we have all of these servers, and then they're going to go inside of the servers container. And now inside of the servers container, I have these. Inside of workstations, I have these. I did my job. That was so easy. How freaking easy was that? That's pretty crazy, right? So here are our questions. After organizing the available computers, how many ended up in the workstations OU? I guess it's 7. So if we have workstations, we go here, we click, hold Shift, click, and then we go all the way here. Does it show me how many are selected? It doesn't show me how many are selected, I guess. So I would need to actually count them. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, whatever. Okay, so 5 or 7. What am I saying? Is it recommendable to create separate OUs for servers and workstations? Yeah, that's probably a good way to approach the situation. So that's all we got for managing computers in Active Directory. So now let's create some group policies to further manage and configure these things. All right, so far we've organized the users and computers in our organizational units just for the hell of it, but the main idea behind this is to be able to deploy different policies and permissions and so on and so forth. So the way that we would do this is through the group policy objects, which is a separate entity than the Active Directory users and computers. So we would actually go through the group policy management application, and you open that up, and that's what it looks like. It's kind of similar to the structure of the Active Directory users managers But of course, obviously, as you can see, it has a variety of different options, and it's a little bit more in depth to what you can do. But overall, it's kind of the same thing, right? You have the two different panes, you have the left side and you have the center. And then once you create something, you can drag and drop it to various locations inside of the domain. So first we have the GPOs that are created, and you would do that under the group policy objects over here. And you can create new ones by right-clicking group policy objects, new group policy, so on and so forth. And then you can link them to the organizational units by going to the individual organizational unit and dragging and dropping that group policy for that OU. So for example, in this case, the default domain controller was dragged and dropped inside of the domain controller organizational unit, and now that group policy has been attached to that organizational unit. So it's fairly intuitive. Once you do this a few times, you get the hang of it, and it's just so easy to do. So we can see the image above that 3 GPOs were created. There was the default domain policy, there was the RDP, remote desktop policy, and then the default domain controller policy as well. And something important to have in mind is that the GPO will apply to the linked OU and any sub OU under it. So for example, the sales OU will still be affected by the default domain policy, because the default domain policy applies to everything inside of the domain, right? So you have the THM local right here, which is our actual domain. The default domain policy will apply to the THM local domain, it'll apply to the domain controllers, it'll apply to the THM organizational unit and every single organizational unit under it, as well as every object that is inside of all of these OUs. So it's hierarchical, right? So if it's at the very, very top level of the domain, it's going to trickle down and it's going to apply to every other entity that is inside of the domain. So the default domain policy, we can look inside of it and see what's inside of it in this case. And so you have the scope, which is basically the how many different devices that it would apply to, essentially, right? This is where the GPO is linked in AD. For the current policy, we can see that it's only been attached to the THM local domain, but by being attached to the THM local domain, it also applies to every single other entity that is inside of it. And then there's the security filtering and everything else that goes with it as well. So security filtering, they're only applied to specific users and computers under an OU. By default, it'll apply to all of the authenticated users groups, which is what we see over here, which includes all of the users and the PCs. And the settings tab includes the actual contents of the policy. And we can see what configurations also apply to it. Each GPO has configurations that apply to the computers only and the configurations that apply to users only. So in this case, the default domain policy only contains computer configurations, right? So there's nothing for user configurations. So that's how you specify what the policy actually manages and what it actually configures. And in this particular example, it only has the computer configurations, nothing for users. So we can click around and do a bunch of other things. So I do recommend that you actually take the time to do this. For the sake of time, in the interest of time, I'm actually going to only go through the instructions that have been given to us for the lab so that we can configure some new policies that will apply to the users and everything else that would be required to get the answers that we need. But I really do recommend that you actually click around, and I'll do a little bit of browsing just to kind of help you get along that path. So if we explore the GPO and expand all the available items using the show links, we can see this is what it looks like. So the default domain indicates really basic configurations that would apply to most domains, including password and account lockout. So if you go to computer configuration, policy, Windows settings, security settings, account policies, and passwords, then you'll see the account policies and password policies. And then you can see account policy and account lockout and all of those. So again, it's hierarchical, right? So computer configuration, policies, Windows, security, account policies, and then you have the password policy and account lockout, which are all under account policies. Since this applies to the whole domain, any change that it would take upon it, it would also affect all of the computers. So if we change the minimum password length policy to require that people have 10, it'll apply this to all of the computers, right? So to do this, you would right click on it and click edit. So on the default domain, you would right click on that and click edit. and then it'll open up a new thing, which allows you to make the actual modifications. And these are all of the different connections to the account policies for that group policy. And so it says enforce password hierarchy. So under this, right? So when you actually open up the group policy manager for that group policy, it'll open it up, and you have under the domain the account policies, and then you have the password, and you have local policies, event logs, and a variety of other things as well that can be configured inside of this particular group policy. So in this particular case, if we go to the password policy under account policies, we can see that we have all of these options. The maximum password age would be 42 days, meaning after 42 days, they have to reset their password. Minimum password age means 1 day, meaning at any point they can choose to reset their password as long as it's a day old, essentially, which would be at any time. Enforcing the password history, so 24 passwords remembered, so you can't use any of your last 24 passwords. And then you have the minimum password length, which is not defined. So the audit of the password length is not defined. The password length itself is 10 characters. Password must meet complexity requirements, which is enabled, which is usually you need to include at least one letter, capital and lowercase, as well as a number and a special character. And then store passwords using reversible encryption, and that is disabled because you do not want the encryption of the password to be reversed. You don't want the encryption to be decrypted. So that's very, very important. So that should be disabled. That's a big security vulnerability if you don't disable that. So plenty of policies can be established. While explaining every one of them would be impossible, so we can just explore, right? So if you click on any of them, you can just go to explain, and it'll explain what that specific policy does. So for example, enforce the password history, meaning that you can essentially set the number of unique new passwords that have been associated, and then they're stored. So in this case, it could be 0 to 24, and then what they have is the maximum, which is 24 passwords that are remembered. So it'll remember your last 24 passwords, right? And then from there, you can move on and create some other ones. So the 24th password, once you get to password 25, you can go back and reuse that very, very first one. So GPO distribution are the GPOs, the group policies, are distributed to the network via a network share called the sysvol, system volume, which is stored in the DC. All users in a domain should typically have access to the share over the network to sync their GPOs periodically. The sysvol share points by default to the Windows sysvol directory on each of the DCs in the network. Once a change has been made to any GPO, it'll take up to 2 hours, or it might take up to 2 hours for computers to catch up. If you want to force any particular computer to sync the GPO immediately, you can do GP update, group policy update, and then /force, and it will force everything to update immediately instead of waiting for it to do 2 hours. So if it is a very security related issue, then you would want to force it so that everything updates immediately. Creating some type of GPO for the THM Incorporated is what we're going to end up doing. So we've been tasked with implementing some GPOs to allow us to actually do those things. So we're going to block non-IT users from accessing the control panel, and then we're going to make workstations and servers lock their screen automatically after 5 minutes of user inactivity to avoid people leaving the sessions exposed. So let's focus on each of these and define what policies we should enable in each GPO and where they would be linked. So first, restricting access to the control panel. So first and foremost, let me actually open up the group policy manager so that we can actually do the things that we need to do here. So group policy, there we go. I'm going to right click on it, and I'm going to open it up as an admin just because I want to have some extra things here. And so there we go. We have the group policy manager here. So there we go. It looks very similar to the Active Directory manager, as you can see. So the first one is restrict access to the control panel. So what we want to do is we want to first and foremost, we want to create something called restrict access to control panel and open it for editing. Since we want this GPO to apply to specific users, we're going to look under the user configuration for the following policy. So I'm going to just kind of go right here. Under the group policy, we can see that we have these right here. And I'm going to right click on this, and I'm going to click new to actually create a new policy. And so I'm going to call this restrict control panel access. There we go. Boom. So we have that. Now there it is. Restrict control panel access is now my policy. So now I want to open it up for configuration. So I'll just double click on that and it's not going to open. So I'm going to do this and I'm going to click edit. So right click and edit. So double click does not work. So right click and edit, and we are now inside of our new policy. And so what we want to do is we want to do it under user configuration, and we want to go into what we can see here, user configuration policies, administrative templates, control panel. So we're going to go here, user configuration, policies, administrative templates, and then control panel. And that's what we got here. So now it says, what do we want? We want to prohibit access to the control panel and the PC settings. And in my case, it says that it has not been configured, right? So prohibit access to the control panel and PC settings has not been configured. So I'm going to open that. That actually worked with a double click. And now I'm going to enable this. And then let's see. So now we have this. We're going to enable it. And I guess that's it, right? So it didn't say anything else. There's no other instructions that we have over here. We just want to make sure that it's been enabled. And then we can move on and link it to all of the OUs that correspond to the users who should not have access to the control panel of the PCs. In this case, we're going to link marketing, management, and sales by dragging the GPO to each one of them. How freaking easy is that? Okay, so I've enabled it. It's all good. So we're going to click on OK. And now it's enabled that we can see over here. Perfect. So now I can go and drag this particular group policy so we can actually close this bad boy out. And now we have this right here. And we can see that there's an authenticated user portion of it that we need to do. So we're going to drag and drop this to the individual departments. So we need marketing, management, and sales. Restrict control panel access. Drag it, management. Cool. Yes. Drag it to marketing. Cool. Yes. And drag it to sales. Cool. Yes. So now I click on this, open it, and we have restrict control panel access, restrict, and restrict. So that worked, and that's as easy as it actually. How crazy is it that it's so easy to essentially administer a domain? That's basically what it's like to administer a domain inside of the Microsoft environment, which is why Microsoft is as popular as it is, because that was freaking easy. Like, you really gotta honestly admit, like, if you spend 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour inside of the group policy manager and just click around to all the different options that can be done here, it's insane how easy it is to be. Okay, so let's actually go do another one. So auto lock the screen. So now we're going to do another one. So the GPO regarding screen locking for workstations, we could directly apply it over the workstation servers and domain controllers that we created previously. So while the solution should work, an alternative consists of simply applying the GPO to the root domain, as we want the GPO to affect all of the computers. Since workstation and servers are all children of the root domain, they will inherit the policy. So that would be the easiest way to do it. So you might notice that if the GPO is applied to the root domain, it will also be inherited by all the other OUs like sales and marketing. Since these OUs are users only, any computer configuration will be ignored by them. Let's create a new GPO and call it the auto lock screen. So here we go. Boom, boom, new. And then we're going to call it the auto lock screen. Boom. And then we're going to go in this motherfucker. Excuse my French. Edit it. And we are now here. So now we are going to go under Windows settings, which is going to be under, so let me see, configure policies. So it's going to be under policies. It's going to be under Windows settings, and under Windows settings, we're going to go to security settings, and under security settings, we're going to go to local policies, and then we're going to go into security options. And there we go. These are all the ones. So now what we want is the auto lock option, which is going to be interactive logon, machine inactivity limit. So we're going to go down to I right here, interactive logon. So now notice this, right? So this is all under security. And if you're studying cybersecurity, which all of you are, because this channel is all about cybersecurity, then these all apply to you. So administrator account access. So the administrator account access, define the policy, explain what it means. So this security setting determines whether the local administrator account is enabled or disabled. If you try to re-enable the administrator account after it has been disabled, and if the current administrator password does not meet the complexity requirements, then you cannot re-enable the account. So the administrator password has actually it has to meet the password requirements, otherwise it cannot be enabled. The alternative member of the administrator group must reset the password on the administrator account. For information, learn how to you can go to that. You have another one here, rename the guest account would be another thing. Audit, so audit the access of global system objects. Devices, allow undock without having to log on. Prevent users from installing printer drivers. I mean, these are all security, because printer drivers could technically have malicious malware or some kind of a Trojan or a worm installed on them, and the user may not know what the hell they're doing. So if they download the incorrect driver, they would now be putting the entire network at risk. And domain members, you have domain controller security settings, you have the interactive logon. Don't display the last signed in. Do not require Control-Alt-Delete to lock the system. So a lot of cases, Control-Alt-Delete will actually be the option that people use to lock their system. Machine inactivity limit, which is what we're going to end up doing, and a variety of other options. So there's so many stuff, and you should click through these. I would highly encourage you to click through them. So interactive logon, machine inactivity limit is the one that we're going to set. I'm just going to double click on that. It's going to open it up. Define this policy setting. It works in seconds. So locking it after 300 seconds. So 300 divided by 60 would be 5. So that would be 5 minutes. And so boom. And now we have 300 seconds. And that is our group policy. And that's pretty much it. I'm just going to close this out. And now I have the auto lock on screen or auto lock screen. And now I can literally just do this, drag this and apply it to the domain. And now it will apply to every single entity inside of the domain, which means the domain controller, the server, all of the groups that are inside of the THM subdirectory here, the management group, marketing, sales, the workstations that apply to them. It applies to everything and everyone because it is applied directly to the domain. So now we've set it to 5 minutes and we already did that. And now we can go, and I dragged it over here, so that's all good as well. And so if I clicked on the auto lock screen, it'll bring my options over here. If I click on authenticated users, let's see, or actually not here, settings, excuse me. We'll go to settings and then we can see what it actually applies to. And so it has the general settings and the links and security filtering. So if I click on security filtering, the authenticated users, the delegation, there is a delegation to every single entity, it seems to be, and the policies themselves. So if we go into the policies, so let me hide this so I actually have some space here. And then we're going to look at the policy. So show the policy, Windows settings, security settings, show the security settings, local policy security options, show that, other, show that, interactive logon, machine inactivity limit, and that is the settings for the auto logon screen. So that was found under the settings button for the auto lock screen for our group policy. So you can see how simply this can be set up and how convenient it can be and how effective it can be, because now it applies to everything inside of the domain. So once the GPO has been applied to the correct OU, we can log in as any user in either marketing, sales, or management for verification. For this task, let's connect using Mark's credentials to see if we can actually go to the control panel, right? Because that's what we want to verify. If we try opening the control panel, we should get a message saying that it's been denied by the administrator. You can also wait 5 minutes to check if the screen is automatically locked. That I'm not going to do, again, for the interest of time. But I am definitely going to check out whether or not Mark can actually access the control panel because he's in marketing. So let's go back to our attack box here. And we're now going to log in as Mark in marketing. And he actually has a nice complex password, so I actually like that password a lot. So we're going to go open up our terminal one more time, and we're going to do xfreeRDP. The user is going to be THM/Mark, although it doesn't matter because it's going to just ask me to reset the freaking user, or not reset the user, but like rededicate, reconfigure. What's the word? Reconfigure the user? Re-enter the user. There you go. That's a good word. And then -V, which is going to be our actual machine itself, which is boom right here. Copy that, paste that, press enter. This is not the right username or password. Okay, fine. So let me actually do the right username or password, which is THM/Mark. Oops, I didn't use the password. Duh. Boom, boom, boom. Where's his password? The password is right here. All right, cool. I have now been logged in as Mark. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to go to this little portion right here, and I have the control panel right there. Click on the control panel. This operation has been canceled due to restrictions in effect on this computer. Please contact the system administrator. So Mark cannot access the control panel. Boom. Okay, excellent. Boom, boom, boom. So what is the name of the network share used to distribute GPOs to the domain machines? That is the sysvol, and we can force that by doing gp update /force. Can a GPO be used to apply settings to users and computers? And that is a yay. That is an absolute yes. You can use a GPO to apply settings to both the computers as well as the users inside of the domain. So we can now move on to the next portion, which is the authentication methods. So let's talk about that. When you use Windows domains, all the credentials are stored inside the DC, the domain controller. Whenever a user tries to authenticate to a service using the domain credentials, the service will ask the domain controller to verify them. The two protocols that can be used for this is the Kerberos protocol as well as the NTLM protocol. Now, Kerberos is the most recent version of this, and if you've tried to apply to any SysAdmin job or anything that is inside of security, usually you will see Kerberos being mentioned as one of the requirements for your skill set, because it's the default protocol for authentication. So if you're going to be a system administrator that is going to provision users or you're going to manage users, you need to be familiar with Kerberos. You don't need to know all of the finer details and everything that goes on under the hood, but you do need to understand that it is the most recent protocol that helps to verify the authentication, essentially meaning if the username and password that the person is using to log in, if that is correct. This is the most recent version of that protocol. The legacy version, the legacy authentication protocol for compatibility that is kept inside of all Windows machines as well as essentially all of Windows environments, is the NetNTLM. And the NTLM hashes are going to be something that you'll probably run across when you go into pen testing and ethical hacking and things like that. So NTLM should be considered obsolete, and it is technically considered obsolete, but most of the networks will still have both of the protocols enabled. So what we need to do is we need to understand both of them. Kerberos is the default authentication, and users who log in using Kerberos will be assigned tickets, okay? So there's the ticket granting ticket, and then there's the ticket granting service. So I'll talk about that in a little bit. So think of tickets as a proof of a previous authentication. Users with tickets can present them to a service to demonstrate that they've already authenticated themselves, so they don't have to keep re-entering their password, right? So when it's used for authentication, when Kerberos is used for authentication, this is what happens. First and foremost, you log in, okay? So you send in your username and a timestamp encrypted using a key derived from the password to the key distribution center. And this service is installed on the domain controller that's in charge of creating tickets, okay? So you send your username and a timestamp, and then you typically would have to you need to also authenticate yourself at least once in order for this to work. So you do this. Once you do this, the username and the timestamp will be sent to the KDC, the distribution center on the key distribution center on the domain controller. The timestamp is important because usually these tickets are only valid for a certain period of time. So if you have not logged in for 24 hours, for example, you will probably need to re-authenticate yourself, and then it will generate a new ticket for you, meaning that the old ticket or the key that will be generated is going to be no longer valid. So if somebody captured that key or captured that ticket, they will no longer be able to use it because the timestamp on it has expired. So that's why the timestamp is important. And of course, the username attaches that specific key and that ticket to you specifically as the user. So first, you send your username and a timestamp will be attached to it, and that's going to be sent to the KDC, and then that's housed on the domain controller. Now, the KDC is going to send back a ticket that grants another ticket. That's what that means. A ticket granting ticket is a ticket that will grant you another ticket, which will allow you to request additional tickets accessing privileges. So the first ticket will grant you other tickets that will allow you to access specific services. The need for a ticket to get more tickets may sound a bit weird, but it allows you to request specific services without actually reusing your password and re-authenticating yourself. So the first ticket will allow you to get more tickets. Okay, if you repeat this enough times, the word ticket will just lose all of its meaning. So the first one is a ticket that will grant you more tickets. Now these tickets are going to be used to grant you access to services. Okay, so where are we? So along with the TGT, a session key is given to the users, which will be used to generate the following requests to get you more tickets. Okay, the TGT, the ticket granting ticket, is encrypted using the Kerberos TGT account's password hash, and therefore the user can't access the content. It's essential to know that the encrypted TGT includes a copy of the session key as a part of its contents, and the KDC has no need to store the session key, as it can recover a copy by decrypting the TGT if it needed. So the user, it does not get access to this. The user doesn't see this because as far as all intensive purposes, it's irrelevant to the user. They just need the access to the services that they need. So the user can't access the content. It's not relevant to them. And the encrypted TGT includes a copy of the session key as a part of its content. And the KDC doesn't store the session key because it can recover it by simply decrypting the original TGT, because the password hash of the TGT is inside of the KRB TGT, the Kerberos ticket granting ticket system. So this is what the visual essentially looks like. The client, which is you send your username and timestamp, and you request your first ticket that grants you more tickets. The domain controller will take that hash value, it'll attach it to that, as well as your user hash that you originally provided, and you will get these two that will be as a response to the ticket that you got. So first you request the TGT, then you get this encrypted TGT as well as your session key that will be sent back to you. And for that session, for that login, for that day specifically, most likely, you're going to have access to this ticket granting ticket as well as whatever services you are allowed to use. Now, here's where the services come in. So when you actually want to connect to a service like a network share or a website or a database or Office 365 or whatever, the TGT, your first ticket that will grant you more tickets, it'll ask the key distribution center for a ticket that will grant you service access. So the TGT will give you a TGS. TGSs are allowing connection to only the specific services that they're created for. So Office 365, for example, will have a TGS. Microsoft SQL will have a TGS or a network share or a website or a database. It'll have each individual one to have its own TGS. And then you'll send the username and a timestamp encrypted using the session key along with the TGT and the service principal name, so on and so forth, which indicate the service and the server name that we want to access. So TGS will you need to get a username and a timestamp encrypted using the session key along with your original TGT, so that you can actually get a service principal name, which will give you that TGS. KDC will then send you the TGS along with the service session key, which will be used to authenticate the service, and then it's encrypted using a key derived from the owner hash. And then the session owner is the user machine account that the service runs under. The TGS contains a copy of the service session key on its encrypted contents, yada. So it sounds complicated, but this is probably the easiest way to do it. So first, you sent your username and a timestamp. The key distribution center got you a hash value from the Kerberos TGT service, and it got the user hash value, and those two were used to create your ticket granting ticket. And then you got a session key. So you got these two things from your first interaction, from your first transaction with the KDC. You got these two things. Then you use those two things, your TGT and your session key. You use those two things to request access to a service. So again, the username goes with it, timestamp goes with it because it will expire. That's what the timestamp is for. And then of course the username gives you specifically the access. And then it uses the TGT, and it will actually use the service name that you want. So in this case, it's the Microsoft SQL server, right? So The SPN in our case was the server or the service principal name. That's what we're trying to get access to, right? So we want a ticket granting service. We want a ticket that grants us service to the Microsoft SQL service. This is our TGT to verify that we actually can access this or can request this, and our username and the timestamp so that we have a limited amount of time that we can access that. We send that to the KDC again, and then there's another hash value as well as the services hash value that will now be assigned to our ticket that grants us access to that service, along with the session key for that service, and now we can actually access that service. So this is the most secure way that we can access services using the Kerberos authentication protocol. And finally, you will actually use your service session key as well as the ticket that grants you service access, as well as your username, as well as the timestamp, and you actually get access to that service. And now you can use Office 365, or in this particular case, Microsoft SQL, right? So that's the process. First, you get a ticket that grants you a ticket or grants you permission to get more tickets. So you get your first permission. Then you use that first ticket to get you a ticket that grants you access to a given service, in this case, Microsoft SQL. And then once you've gotten your ticket granting service, I'm like losing my mind. There's so many acronyms. So you use your ticket that grants you more tickets to get a ticket that grants you service. And then you use the ticket that grants you the service to actually get access to the service. It's kind of simple once you wrap your head around it. So hopefully that actually made sense. And then we have the old school version of this whole thing, which is the net NTLM authentication. And this is a challenge response mechanism. So this has nothing to do with tickets. So you don't have to worry about tickets and saying the word ticket over and over and over again. So this is the whole process. So at the very, very beginning, there's the hash value and a challenge. And the challenge is typically the password. And then so you have your username and your password. And then you send that as your authentication. And then the server, this is where the challenge comes in. And the challenge is, okay, well, what's your password? And then you submit your password, and it's like, okay, so now I'm going to send the challenge, which was what's your password, as well as the response, which is the actual password itself. I'm going to send that challenge and a response to the domain controller. The domain controller is going to verify all of it. And if the verification is right, if you actually got the password correct, then you will get access. So you will get an allow message that will go to the server, and then the server will forward that allow message to the client, which is you. If the password was not correct, so if the answer to the challenge was not correct, then you will get a deny message that will be passed from the domain controller to the server, and then the server will submit that deny message to you as the client, and now you are denied a access. So here's the breakdown. Client sends an authentication to the server that they want to access. Server generates a random number and sends it as a challenge to the client. Client combines the NTLM password hash with the challenge and any other data to generate a response to the challenge. And then the server forwards the challenge and the response to the domain controller. The domain controller uses the challenge to recalculate the response and compares it to the original response by the client. If they both match, the client is authenticated. Otherwise, the access is denied. Server forwards that message to the result to the client, and you get access or you get denied. The password's hash for the user is never transmitted to the network for security. It's just a part of that original hash and the challenge so that you can generate the response and submit that to see if all of that stuff actually matches. So the described process applies when using a domain account. If the local account is used, the server can verify the response to the challenge without actually requiring interaction with the domain controller, since it has the password hash locally on the SAM, on the SAM. So this is actually trying to access a domain account or a domain controller. If you're just using a local account, which is on the local server, it won't do this specific process to actually try to connect and communicate with the domain controller. So will a current version of Windows use NetNTLM as a preferred authentication? That would be no, because it's going to use Kerberos, so nay. When referring to Kerberos, what type of ticket allows us to request further tickets known as the tickets that grant service? And so it would be a ticket that grants you more tickets. So a ticket that grants tickets is a ticket granting ticket. Now, when using NetNTLM, is a user's password transmitted over the network at any point? The answer to that would be a nay. That is a no. It is not transferred. So the client sends a request to authenticate. Server sends a random number and sends it as a challenge to the client. The client combines their password hash with the challenge and any other data to generate a response to the challenge and sends it back to the server. Server forwards the challenge and the response to the domain, and then the domain controller uses that to calculate whether or not they have access. The actual password hash is never transmitted. It's used in this specific interaction to verify that this person has permission to even respond to the challenge, right? So you generate the password hash so that you can actually authenticate yourself as a user that even belongs in this environment so that you can respond to the challenge, and then whether or not you actually have the right response to the challenge, that will allow you to get access to the service on the server and the domain controller. So that's it for authentication methods. Let's actually cover this very last piece, which is under trees, forests, and trusts. Everything that we've discussed so far has to do with a single domain and the role of the domain controller that plays back with that single domain and how it actually joins the computers, the servers, and users inside of that single domain. So this is a recap right here. You have the domain and you have the DC root, which would be the domain controller. And then you have the THM local, which is the overall domain. And then inside of this, you have the computers and the servers and the users, so on and so forth. This is one domain. Now, when the company grows, the network grows, meaning that the company may have new locations, right? It may have new countries that they go into, new states that they go into, and each state. So, for example, going back to our banking example, really big banks like Bank of America have branches in every single state. And then they also have branches in each of the counties in that state. So I wouldn't be surprised if each freaking county had its own overall domain. And honestly, not even that. It's probably each branch has maybe a county. It depends on how many employees they have. They have like thousands of employees. So it's like each branch probably has its own domain, and then inside of the well, no, I would say yeah, each county. It's each county probably has its own domain, and then inside of that county, you have each branch that has an organizational unit, and then inside of the branch, there are other organizational units for the various roles, and then the permissions that are assigned to each one of those roles. So that seems more practical to me. But so you have all of these domains, right? So if each state has multiple domains for each one of the counties, that means that each state overall is probably one giant tree, right? So, and then the overall concept is that the forest includes all of the trees for that company. So each state has a tree that has a bunch of domains in it, and then each country that Bank of America is in is one forest, so to speak. And then based on the regulatory compliance of that country, each forest has its own group policies and its own laws that govern it. And it would be separate from each other country, because for the most part, even though Canada and the United States and Europe and South Africa or whatever, even though all of these countries essentially have similar rules, like you can't rob somebody's account, for example. That probably applies to every bank across the world, but there is individual jurisdiction laws that would apply to each country, and so each forest would have to have its own overall rules that govern it, right? So if you look at the company expanding to a new country, the new country has different laws and regulations that require you to update the GFOs to comply. In addition, you also have IT people in both countries, and each team needs to manage the resources that correspond to each country without interfering with the other team. You can create a complex OU structure and use delegations to achieve this. Having a huge Active Directory structure is going to be very hard to manage, especially when you get into countries. Like if you're big enough to be in multiple countries, it's going to be too much to be inside of one single domain and have a bunch of organizational units. So Active Directory supports integrating multiple domains so that you can partition your network into units that can be managed independently. And if you have two domains that share the same namespace, for example, THM local, the domains can be joined into a tree. So if you have THM local domain split into two subdomains for the UK and US branches, you would have uk.thm local and then us.thm local. You could build a tree now with the root domain of THM local and two subdomains called UK da da da. Each one of them have their own ADs, they have their own computers, they have their own domain controllers, so on and so forth. So this is the domain controller overall, THM local, but now there's the UK location and then there's the US location. And all of this is now a tree. Look at how beautiful that looks. So this structure gives us better control over who can access what in the domain. The IT people from the UK will have their own DC that manages the UK. For example, a UK user would not be able to manage the US user. In that way, the domain administrator of each branch will have complete control over their respective DCs, but not other branches' DCs. Policies can also be configured independently for each domain in the tree. An insecurity group needs to be introduced when talking about trees and forests, which is the enterprise admin group. Will grant a user administrative privileges over all of an enterprise's domains. Each domain would still have its own domain administrator with administrative privileges over the single domain, and the enterprise admin can control everything in the enterprise. So in this case, this guy has a domain admin, this one has a domain admin, but this now has an enterprise admin, and this enterprise admin can manage everything inside of this tree. The forest is where things become even more interesting. So domains you manage can also be configured in different namespaces. So suppose that the company continues to grow and eventually acquires another company called MHT Incorporated, which means that this one is THM local, this one is MHT local. So now you have two separate root domains, and then for each root domain you have the various countries. So THM local has UK and the US, MHT has Europe and Asia, right? So still the concept applies, but now these two massive trees are now a part of the overall company. So the parent company, for example, the venture capital company that owns both of these companies. And for each one of them, there is now an enterprise administrator, and then each one of these domains has a domain administrator, so on and so forth. So when the companies merge, you will probably have different domain trees for each company, each managed by their own IT department. The union of several trees with different namespaces in the network is known as a forest. So keep this in mind. A tree requires to have the same root domain, and then you can have different locations. A forest comes into play when you have two different root domains, and then those domains will have individual locations and their own individual domains, so on and so forth. So, or their own extensions, let's call them subdomains. But for the most part, as long as it's on the same root domain, it's considered to be a tree. If it's two separate root domains, now you have a forest, okay? Trust relationships come into play when you have multiple trees. So if you have multiple domains organized in trees and forests, allows you to have a nice compartmentalized network in terms of management and resources. But at a certain point, a user at THM UK might need to access a shared file in one of the MHT Asia service. For this to happen, the domain arranged in trees and forests are joined together by a trust relationship, meaning between the domains allows a user authorization from one domain to access resources from another domain. The simplest trust relationship can be established, which is a one-way trust relationship. And a one-way trust relationship, domain AAA trusts domain BBB, meaning that a BBB user can be authorized to access resources on AAA. So if A trusts B, that means that B has access to A's contents, right? So if A trusts in this direction, B can actually access in this direction. That is called a one-way trust relationship. The trust is going in only in one way, meaning the access is only going in one way. Another way to look at it is that if the trust is only going this way, there is no trust coming this way. So A can't access B's contents. Does that make sense? Because the trust is only going in this direction, meaning that only B gets to access these guys. The direction of the one-way is contrary to that of access direction. So obviously you can see that. Two-way trust relationship can also be made to allow both domains to mutually authorize users from the other. By default, joining several domains under a tree or a forest will form a two-way trust relationship, meaning you can access this one, or they can access this one, they can access this one. It's a two-way trust relationship. So it's important to note that having a trust relationship between domains doesn't automatically grant access to all the resources on the other domains. Once the trust relationship is established, you have to actually authorize users across those domains, as well as the stuff that they actually have access to. So what is authorized or not. So it doesn't necessarily mean that they get access to everything. It's just that you have to now configure what is covered under that trust relationship so that each one of those domains can access, so on and so forth. So most likely there's going to be another organizational unit that's created for the share between the two domains. And then the stuff that is going to be shareable will be put inside of that organizational unit. And then these guys can now start sharing the assets between each other. So what is a group of window domains that share the same namespace? That is called a tree. And what should be configured between two domains for a user in domain A to access a resource in domain B? And that would be a trust relationship. And that, my friends, covers the basics of Active Directory. Congratulations if you've made it this far. All right, so in this room, as a conclusion, we've gone through the basic components and concepts that are related to Active Directory and Windows domains. This is an introduction because, as you saw, there are just so many ways that you can configure a group policy. There are so many things that you can do. It is a complex environment, but for the most part, it's also very user-friendly. So if you actually go through the Linux Plus tutorial that I launched this past week, and compare what it's like to create users and create groups and assign permissions and so on and so forth. If you look at that compared to what we just did with the drag and drop resources that we just created, it's a night and day difference as far as simplicity is concerned. That's why Windows is used for most enterprise environments, because it's very simple to administer, and then you can have thousands of users that you can just drag and drop, right? So that's the simplicity aspect of it. But even in that, like all of that being said, there's still a lot of complexity that goes into it, because there's so much that you can do. As we got towards the end, you saw between trees and forests and things like that. So imagine that you're dealing with a company that has 5,000 employees instead of 100, or a company that is running in every single one of the 50 states in America instead of just one city on the West Coast, or a company that is inside of the UK as well as America, as well as Asia, as well as Europe. Like, when you start thinking about these things, you can imagine how quickly it becomes more and more complex. So this was an introductory room that was for, obviously we're in Cybersecurity 101, so it is obviously an introductory introduction to Active Directory. However, you basically just extrapolate these concepts and you can go into much larger environments. I encourage you to do this in your own computer and just click around and start looking at the group, especially if you have a Windows computer, which a lot of you people, I know you already do. So if you have a Windows computer, do this. Try it out. Go click around and learn about the Active Directory group management and user management. Go look at the group policies and configure some of your own security policies to just make sure that your computer is as secure as it possibly can be. So highly, highly recommended that you dive deeper into this, especially if you're serious about cybersecurity, because this will be something that you run across no matter what job you go into, because most likely every company that you try to apply to, for the most part, is going to be using Windows and Active Directory to provision their users and to manage their users and to provision new assets and objects inside of their organization, create new organizational units, group policies, etc., etc., etc. So hopefully this was actually useful for you. And if you're interested, there's actually the Compromising Active Directory module, which is something that you can look at if you wanted to see what it's like to break into Active Directory and look at it from the pen tester's point of view. And this is actually something that I've done most of these rooms. There's 2 that I have not finished. So I'm excited to recreate all of those videos for you and kind of break it down in more of a simple understanding so that you can really wrap your head around it as well. and it's obviously going to be another great refresher for me so that it can re-ingrain the contents inside of my own brain. But when you get the basics under your belt and you have a really good, strong understanding of the foundations, then all of the advanced pen testing stuff and the hacking stuff becomes way easier, because you get how this whole thing works, and you can break into these systems and break these systems easily, or easier, I'll say that. So that was it for our Active Directory basics room inside of the Cybersecurity 101 pathway of TryHackMe. If you are interested in learning more about cybersecurity, or if you want to get notified of the new videos that come out in the CySec 101 pathway, I do encourage you to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so that you get notified the next time that a video comes out. If you want to go search through everything that's already on the channel, there's over 230 videos that are currently existing on this channel, and it's growing very, very quickly. I'm kind of surprised that there's as much content as there is on here. I kind of lost my mind a little bit when I started this channel at the beginning of 2024. Yeah, that's when we started it. We went nuts with it, and I just created video after video, and then all of a sudden the community started growing, and now we have this really beautiful community. And because the community is as interested in it as possible, or as interested in it as we are, as you guys are, it makes me want to create more content for you. So there's a lot of stuff that's available on this channel already. As you can see, it's a massive amount of content that's available. And let's actually go to the video tab so you can see everything that's going on. So there's a lot of stuff that's available on this channel, and you just keep scrolling and you'll find more and more information. And to find something specific, so if you're interested in finding a specific topic, you can always just go to this little button right here, which is the search button. So let me see if I can zoom in properly. This button right here, you just click on that and then search for whatever you want. And there's a pretty good chance that it actually exists on this channel, or there is at least some kind of video that is relevant to it on this channel. A lot of these things have to do with TryHackMe's labs, but there's been a lot of stuff that I've also created that are standalone, and I just recently got into creating some stuff for actual certification. So the very first one was the Linux Plus, because I got a lot of requests for Linux Plus information. The next one is going to be Security Plus, and then there's of course everything that we're going to do inside of Cybersecurity 101 and the CySec 101 pathway of TryHackMe. So if you are interested in any of that stuff, I do encourage you to like, subscribe, turn on the notification bell so that you get notified the next time that a video comes out. And then of course, join the comment section. So drop comments, ask questions. I do respond to all of the comments that come in. And if it's a really good question, then I'll create a video in response to your question. And then you'll get a shout out and you'll get accreditation for being the person that inspired that content. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Like, subscribe, turn on the notification bell so that you get notified the next time that a video comes out. And if you have not checked it out already, I do recommend that you check out the Hackaholics Anonymous membership community. This is the premier YouTube community for cybersecurity and ethical hacking and people who are in the security profession. There's a lot of stuff that gets given away to the people in this community. We have our supporters group, which is our very entry-level tier, and I love them tremendously. And even for their supporters group, we created a Discord server so that you get access to me as well as all of our advanced members, and you can get access to the community and get all your questions answered and just have somebody be alongside you as you go through your journey of cybersecurity and hacking. But then there's the advanced members and the advanced tiers that they get access to the Python automations, and they get access to document downloads and exclusive content and a lot of other stuff, as well as their own Discord servers and so on and so forth. We do live streams at the end of the month, and there's a lot of stuff that's available for the advanced members. But overall, this is the community, in my humble opinion, that is the premier community. And as the community grows, as the YouTube channel grows, I get more affirmation that this is actually the best community for people who are interested in cybersecurity and ethical hacking. And I've compared it to a lot of the other communities that's on YouTube, and we give away way more value, hands down. It's not even close. Just the Python automations that are given away to the advanced members is something that I think is worth the price of it just by itself. But then there's the live sessions and the Discords and the downloads and the exclusive content and all of that stuff that comes into it that I think just makes it over the top. So if you have not checked out Hackaholics Anonymous. I highly encourage you to check out Hackaholics Anonymous. And if you just want to show support, it's $5. I know people that spend more money on coffee every single day. So $5 will actually go a long way, and it will help out this community, and it would allow me to create even more crazy content and value for you guys. And the downloads may be limited to the Hackaholics Anonymous members, but all of the videos, like the Linux Plus series, is available for free to everybody in the community. So if you just want to watch them, you just go watch them, and you get access to everything that's available to the Linux Plus series. And that's 5 massive videos full of content. So I'm gonna stop plugging, but I'm telling you, it's worth it. Go check it out if you haven't done so already. You can watch the video to see what all the perks are, or you can just click on this read more button at the bottom right here, and then you'll see what all the perks are. And that's pretty much it. So boy, Hank Hackerson at Hank Hacks Hackers, your favorite network and system attacker / protector. If no one else loves you, Hank loves you. Love, peace, and chicken grease. And I'll see you in the next video. Later.